ESPN's Brett Okamoto was the one who shared the news. So let's just set it up this way. The UFC has, I don't know if they announced, but obviously Okamoto reported from Dana White, so I'm assuming that this is more or less official. August 7th in Houston, Texas, a interim title will be up for grabs in the heavyweight division. Ciryl Gane, who just came off that win over Alexander Volkov, is going to take on Derrick Lewis, who, of course, is coming off his big win against Curtis Blaydes. So Lewis versus Gane, August 7th, Houston, Texas, interim title. And you might be asking like me and BC did, which is, wait, didn't Francis just get it 3 months ago? Why the fuck is there an interim title in August? BC, we know that Dana White said that the management of Francis Ngannou was full of shit, that they should not act surprised because they said that they couldn't believe it. His manager fires back in this long comment on Instagram, basically saying, you're lying, Dana White. I have the receipts more or less to prove it. Why don't we put it all out there? Now, BC, with all that information out there, what is your reaction to what the UFC is doing and then the subsequent dust-up between Francis's management and Dana White?
Well, we can get to the management dust-up in a few seconds when we throw to that stuff so we can get a deeper look. But just on the surface, this decision, Luke, it's troubling. I don't understand it. So here's how I understand it, right? I just said I didn't understand it. But you get my point here. To me, this feels like another short-term decision with no lack of care for the long-term consequences. Now, what are the long-term consequences? It's something, obviously, that Dana White doesn't care about, but as traditionalists and fans, we should care about. And that's the idea that an interim title has any level of credibility. When they act like this, Luke, it has zero level. So here's the deal. Francis Ngannou had wanted, and you could argue had deserved, to have already fought for an interim title when he was forced to basically just sit around and wait for Stipe and DC to complete their trilogy. It would have been perfect for him to have that fight against Jair Rozenstruik for the interim title. He pushed for it. UFC was like, you're shit out of luck. But now 3 months after winning it, because he can't go on the date they want, we're just going to take an interim title and throw it out there. So the short-term element of this, Luke, is ridiculous. To me, this feels like UFC is looking at that date in Houston. They want to do a big pay-per-view. It's one of their big markets. They don't believe the Amanda Nunes title bout against Juliana Pena would carry the card as a main event. And Luke, I think history shows us it wouldn't. You know what's one of the worst selling pay-per-views in UFC history? That time Amanda defended against Rocky Pennington. I mean, it was like something, Luke, like 75,000 buys. I mean, just ridiculously bad. I'm not against them getting creative and saying, look, we got to get something in this main event that would sell, which I don't even care if that's grabbing a Diaz brother, just doing something. But when you put a fake title on the line in a fight with two guys who don't deserve to fight for this fake title because the champion just won the belt and he's telling you straight up, I can come back in September, and you know that I can come back in September, and you got his management team saying, we already agreed and signed the deal to come back in September, and now you're just going to throw this out there? Luke, I get that there's going to be fans that are going to use the stance you used to have on interim titles, which is like, I don't really care about them as long as the fighters get paid. And I know that Dana is going to laugh all the way to the bank because this will make this pay-per-view sell more. And in his short history of doing this, when he floats an interim title out there, because of the opportunity at stake for somebody to go from average UFC pay to championship level, almost 1% pay, should they win that title and then get in a title fight and win it, people fight their ass off in interim title bouts. They tend to be exciting theater. So why am I hung up on the traditionalist side of this? Because UFC is the last bastion of hope where the titles really matter. They don't tend to do this boxing bullshit type of decision-making where it's like, we'll just float out an interim or vacant title, or we'll create a franchise champion, or we'll do all this bullshit. No, one name, one face, one division, one champion, unless there is circumstances like a Frank Mir motorcycle accident where the guy can't defend and you want to set the division forward and keep it moving. The fact that there's no consistency in the way these decisions are made makes UFC look like a laughingstock. It's obviously they don't care about it, and to be fair, they're making so many great decisions as a whole, Luke, that it's a bit nitpicky to pick out one like I'm doing right now. But I don't, as I always say, I am the boxing guy on this show. I know the sins of boxing. Don't do that just to save one pay-per-view card. It makes everything look bad. The winner is not a champion. They are not a fucking champion, Luke, okay? I'm not here for this shit.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. If there is any silver lining, such as there can be in a situation like this, it's that the winner of Lewis versus Gane, whoever that may be, when they face Francis, they're going to get pay-per-view points by virtue of having the interim title. So they'll get a bigger paycheck than they would were there no interim title there. Okay, I can at least be happy about that for whoever that fighter may be. I tend to think it'll be Gane, but we'll have to see. Now, that out of the way, this is not a very difficult argument to make. For example, I mean, you could point to any amount of history in other situations like this, but we don't even have to look at history. How about just looking at the present moment? At bantamweight, you had Aljamain Sterling winning a title through, let's just put it, very controversial means. So then he gets the title and he can't turn around and defend it while there's a bottleneck in that division because he has to get long-awaited neck surgery, which I totally understand. If you're going to defend that title against a guy like Peter Yan, you want to be in your best health. And if you've had a lingering issue, there's no time like the present. Fine. No issue with that. But by the time that fight happens, according to the timeline that Aljamain Sterling has given, it will be around October or November. Well, the fight took place in March. So you're talking about a 7 or 8 months that will have passed, probably bare minimum, before they make that contest, meaning Francis saying he wanted to fight in September would have only been 6 months, and they're already turning around and making a title for it. It's obviously arbitrary. It is obviously just something that they want to do because they feel like they want to do it for whatever reason it may be, whether or not it's to your point, buoy that pay-per-view to give it a little bit more oomph, put Derrick Lewis in Houston, whatever their reasoning might be. It's obviously just something that they just decided and made up. There's no formal process, and we can sit here and bitch about it all day, and I've been bitching about it since the UFC's been doing stuff like this, but I'm going to point out one more time, fighters, if you don't like this kind of thing, me and Brian can say whatever we want. We are not the cavalry. We are not going to be in a position to change this. The only people who can change this are your management, maybe, or collectively, you all deciding to do something about it. It is up to you to fix it. I will also add, BC, though, that I did speak to some people in Francis's camp, and again, what is the truth? I've not seen the receipts between what UFC had to say and what Francis's management had to say. But some folks that are close to him told me that UFC was very much informed about what was happening. They knew that he was going to be on vacation until the end of June and that he would come back from vacation and then be able to articulate a timeline. But just do the math on that. He's not going to be ready to fight 4 fucking weeks later at the earliest. It would have been late August, maybe early September. They depict, just to be on the safe side, the end of September. Hello, 6 months past your first title defense. That's not a super quick turnaround, but that's literally not even the latest turnaround by other existing champions at the moment. The whole thing is insane. The whole thing is capricious. But it is what it is, BC, because this is how the UFC is able to exercise control. Last thing I'll say on this.
Luke.
Last thing, hold on, I'll pitch it right back. Last thing. I did see a series of really interesting tweets from Ariel Helwani, who was pointing out that Hunter Campbell, who's sort of this lawyer / top executive there at the company, he's liked by a lot of people. A lot of fighters like to do business with him. But according to Helwani, and this is what I hear as well, that they'll threaten to strip people. I did not hear from anyone in Francis's camp that the UFC threatened to strip them, but the idea that they did not know what they were working with or they didn't have a timeline to understand what they'd be up against, they thought he'd be ready by August 7th, that's patently, they deny that there is any situation that they didn't know that was coming.
It's like, look, UFC is so successful right now. The last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I mean, they're just unbelievable. As a fan, as a journalist, it's just been a pleasure to watch this journey. But separate from the fight pay issue, which is an issue, it's like the only nitpicky thing I have is just this blasé decision-making, usually as it pertains to championships, meaning like who gets stripped when they're a champ, right? Amanda Nunes can hold on to both belts forever, but DC gets stripped instantly. Conor can hold on to 2 belts and kind of do what he wants for a certain amount of time, but other people get stripped instantly. That sort of haphazard decision-making, Luke, it's not fair to the fighters. I mean, it is 100% not fair to Francis Ngannou to have any sort of potential threat of being stripped if you're not perfectly on their timeline. I mean, I hate interim titles to begin with, and I think Colby and Tony Ferguson got raw deals and how their titles were taken away. Even full titles in the past, whether we're talking about Nico Montano or Jermaine Durand. I mean, I know other people don't agree with me on the GDR side of it, but still, just the way haphazardly, we're like, nope, we're taking that away from you. We're doing this. Like, the fighters are already dealing, Luke, with the unforgiving nature of this sport to begin with, the fighter pay and the whole idea of like just trying to become that 1% and be taken care of and set yourself up. But now we just, on top of that, we have this built-in threat that if you can't stay on some company man schedule that is very quick on turnarounds, that we have the ability to just bully and threaten that we take it away. It's like that looks really bad, but on a whole, it's like you play to win the game. You know, that's that famous coach, that the coach Herm Edwards has that famous quote, right? You play to win the game. Luke, I know this is a business. I know this is entertainment. But these people commit their lives to this craft to win a championship. Yes, there's because of the money backing with it, but to be considered the best in the world at what they do, when you make those titles mean less, what do you have left at the end of the day? Okay, you still have like fun fights and grudge matches and that, but man, when you have this level of control, which UFC has, which other promotions and other combat sports don't, man, you have to protect the integrity of that at all costs. Because at the end of the day, that's why people tune into fights where, let's say, both guys aren't great trash talkers. Or let's say there's no great, theme to build to this and storyline. At the end of the day, you're like, well, they are competing for the UFC's championship, and that freaking means something, right? That's going to change their lives. Like, don't bastardize that. I'm still, Luke, not fully over that the fact that Dustin Poirier, to me, is the best lightweight in the world, and he's not fighting for the lightweight title. I know, again, that's his decision. He's choosing the money of Conor over the opportunity to face Charles Oliveira or Michael Chandler or whatever, how that would have played out. But even that, to me, is a little bit of a stain on the idea that you want the best in show to fight the other guy who's the best in show to figure out who's the real best in show. This goes against that grain, and I hate it. But, Luke, we should get into the Francis side of this, and we should get into those tweets and IG messages, because it looks like Team Ngannou is almost declaring war here, Luke.
Yeah, well, there's just one last thing on this, which is, for all of the belly aching that we're doing here, why doesn't it matter? Because ultimately, I'm going to argue that it probably won't matter. I think it's worth it if you're in media to try and call reality as best you can, make sense of it. So that's what we're doing here. That's our job. But on the other hand, the UFC knew they were probably going to get pushback in the media on some level when they did this, but they went ahead and did it anyway. Why? Well, because they know it's going to work. They know that if they put a belt around that, by the way, Derrick Lewis in Houston on the cusp of having a belt around his waist, interim or otherwise, just the picture of the story. Because if Derrick Lewis, he may not, but if he goes and says, wow, this is the most important fight of my career, winning a belt would mean everything to me, all of a sudden takes on a brand new character that I think the fans would probably get behind because he's a very sympathetic character. And hey, by the way, beating Ciryl Gane would be a big fucking deal. Like, I get why he would be incredibly proud of that achievement. All I'm pointing out is if the UFC can do things that they know might cause very, very short-term isolated blowback and then will result in, let's say, relative to what it would have been if that fight was not on the card, an improved economic result, and there's no real cost to the business, why wouldn't they do it? Why would they not just go forward with things like this? I know what your argument is, that there should be some kind of safeguarding of the things that are important to the business if you have this much control of it. Fair enough. And whether it's a monopoly or monopsony, the courts can decide. But I can just tell you that you can just look around and see that they have so much control over the fighters, over the industry, over the amount of fighters that matter, that they can do stuff like this, and the consequences are pretty minimal. Until that dynamic changes for whatever reason, this will not be the last time you get an interim title. That's a bit of a head scratcher. Now, why don't you lead us into the other part of the discussion?
I want to introduce a quick fix. I've said it before. I think you and I had this debate on the MMA Beat back in the day. But Luke, here's the deal. Because interim titles to me are, especially when UFC is bastardizing what it actually means, right? If a long-standing champion is hurt and can't fight for a year, but you're not going to strip them because they're your long-standing champion, you put an interim title at stake, you build toward the storyline of unifying the belt. We've seen it before. Unfortunately, the last 4 or 5 times this has happened, Luke, it just hasn't made a whole ton of sense, right? The champion has not been inactive. But the problem for me is seeing a guy to be able to go down in the history books, like Carlos Condon at welterweight, Shane Carwin at heavyweight, as interim champions. Like, if that's like, I don't want to take away that accomplishment for them and what it means for them. But Luke, you and I are in some ways UFC historians based on our job title to a certain degree. I just don't consider them champions. So since UFC has bastardized the idea of interim champion to essentially make it mean this, number one contender. We already know we get excited when there's a good fight on a UFC card. We go, hey, by the way, that could be a quasi number one contender fight. That means it means more. If UFC wants to officially make number one contender fights, then take off the interim champion label. Get rid of the title belt, which looks exactly like the actual title belt, by the way, because it's not the real title. If you want to introduce a green jacket like the Masters or a ring or a large sombrero, I don't even care what it is, Luke. A gold-plated athletic cup for your cock cover, Luke? I don't even care what it is. But something that specifies that this fight is more important than others, although it's not a title fight, because it's going to produce the next championship contender. And if that means giving them the right money that an interim title fight would normally give, then everyone wins in this case. You don't go down in history as a fake champion. You go down in history as I fought in a number one contenders match, and I won it. And I got to put on this comfy jacket and show it off. Maybe that means nothing to you, Luke, but the belt looks exactly like the real belt, only it ain't real, Luke.
All right. So you're big into this battle between Francis and his management. I got to fix
I want you to respond to what I said, motherfucker.
Hold on, I'd love to, but I got a computer glitch I need to fix before the whole shit comes down. Introduce that part of the topic, and why does it matter to you? We've seen managers beef with Dana. Isn't this, let me play devil's advocate, BC, isn't this just another run-of-the-mill Dana versus some famous fighter's manager?
I mean, it might be, but it feels like Francis's manager is coming guns blazing at a time, Luke, where you just gave that speech about, the only change that's going to happen is if it comes from them. The time is right. I mean, it's ripe right now with fighter pay still a big topic for now fighter treatment as champion, right? I mean, look, the only reason why Francis Ngannou is not fighting John Jones next, Luke, which is the fight to make as you fix your computer, and I respect that. It's the fight to frickin' make. The only reason it's not happening is because UFC is fighting with John over how much someone in his spot should be making. They don't want to pay him that until he comes out and wins the championship. So for someone who actually is the champion and is potentially getting treated this way, it's very important to come out guns blazing and stand up. Let's throw Manich, if we can, to that little IG conversation. It feels pretty important here. There's Francis's take, which makes sense. Can we zoom in here?
Yeah, it's a little hard for me to read. Here we go. This comes as a complete shock to make an interim title so soon. If you look at the history of this division, it comes as a surprise. Francis is just now returning to the States to begin training, and he won the title 3 months ago. We're unsure of what the reasoning is behind this, but we hope to get clarity soon and figure out something with the UFC soon. At the end of the day, they're in control of these decisions. That is the manager of Francis. By the way, Francis rep by CAA, a big agency.
Well, Francis's manager, I don't know if we have that actual IG convo, but he went at Dana to the point of almost sort of, oh, here it is. So Dana responds under Brett's IG post of the account from Francis's team and says Francis's manager is full of shit. He knows exactly what's going on, and he isn't shocked at all because we told him several times this was coming. His management is incompetent, and hopefully Francis starts taking a look at new people to help his career. That's a pretty firm public statement to be made from the UFC president there. Manish, do we then have that long response? Here it is, actually, Luke.
Okay, so let's see this. So, very quickly, Dana White, LOL, complete shock with your decision after we said September was good for us. Complete shock that you guys made threats after less than 3 months, after you were all aware. Complete shock after you knew why Francis needed more time. That is correct. I know you're passionate, but you're trying to discredit my integrity when you've been nothing but when I've been nothing but respectful to you, Hunter, and your entire staff. Speaks more about you than it does me. I'm not even mad. I'm actually impressed that I've gotten your attention in competent management. I think we've done a damn good job. I think you really don't like the fact that Francis is being represented by not only me, but an entire agency, one of which you cannot control, hence why you have people trying to rep him all the time to your benefit. I tell you what, let's disclose everything for people to see. Emails, calls, texts, everything. Deal? Because I'm ready to get blackballed by UFC. I'm not defined by it, you or anyone else for that matter. How's that sound? Sincerely, Markel.
Wow, sincerely, your old employee. So, Luke, I mean, that's pretty... I mean, would you argue, Luke, that no one's come at Dana that hard except for Conor McGregor a year and a half ago exposing the DMs of their actual discussions to try to show, that that his word was true in terms of who he wanted to fight and all that. And Brendan Schaub, Luke, when they had that back and forth, Schaub came guns blazing with the Eskimo Bro line, and Dana took the knee and backed off and put the arms down in that fight. So shout out to Brendan on that one, Luke. But again, change is not going to happen unless these guys make these threats. Am I wrong, Luke? Make these threats to make certain things public so that UFC cannot do bullying tactics. Again, we don't know. We're not inside, right? We're hearing both sides of the story. But you're hearing this enough times from fighters that it's not hard to believe them. I'd almost be like, hey, why don't you make this shit public if fighters feel like they're getting bullied and that things are getting announced without their knowledge, right? Like they agree to a fight against somebody and then that fighter gets announced to be fighting somebody else. They're like, am I just being used as a negotiation ploy here? Like what happened to Khabib ahead of 205? If this shit starts going public and we see the receipts, Luke, I know that's juicy. I know that's very, social media voyeuristic, but won't that create change?
I'm skeptical. I mean, here's the thing. Whenever you see Dana getting mad at a manager, almost invariably, not totally true, but usually it's because the manager's doing a pretty good job. Like, for example, you never hear Dana say nice things about Holly Holm's manager, but BC, you know who Holly Holm's manager is. This is a dude that's an old school boxing manager. He doesn't give a fuck what you think about anything. He's just going to do what he's going to do. He's going to promote Holly's interests the best that they can be promoted, and that's what it's going to be. So because he doesn't play ball with UFC in that way, I don't think he reps a ton of MMA clients anyway. Maybe just her. He gets sideways with them, but that's the job. The job of a manager is to not intentionally get sideways with them, but when shit hits the fan, you're not supposed to be on the promoter side. You're supposed to have divergent interests. I still got to say though that like I've seen people beef with UFC over this stuff. I remember when Couture tried to say he was going to retire from his contract, and there were press conferences about what was in those contracts, and they released it publicly, and it kind of got to a somewhat better place for Randy individually, and maybe you can get to a somewhat better place for Francis individually. But like, you want to create change in this industry, I'm going to keep saying it until I'm blue in the face. Either get a union or pass the Ali Act, or win this lawsuit, because all this other shit everyone's doing looks nice for Instagram, good fodder for us here on Morning Kombat. I'm not a believer that it actually results in substantive industry-wide change, BC. I'm skeptical.
Well, if you don't try, Luke, nothing's going to change, okay?
That's true. Listen, laying down is not the answer. But the question is, what is the path to meaningful, lasting change? Unless you really want to, you got to hammer UFC. Honestly, I mean, I don't know which path is the correct one. There's a lot of debate about what would be best for the industry and best for the fighters, and really keep UFC in a healthy position too. But like, I think people think that getting mean on social media is like an actionable form of change, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that it is.
Well, it's what I don't believe is a healthy form of change is when the UFC makes these public declarations and goes against what a fighter potentially said. I mean, that seems like a dirty tactic, Luke. So sometimes The only way to counter a dirty tactic is by trying to come clean. Correct, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if they've got emails and texts and they feel like it's important to get that story out there, then put them out there. But like all these vague threats about what they're going to do and blah, 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 like...
The other thing is, I don't want to see UFC continue to go down these roads and fight the fighters these ways, because it only ends in the guys who should be champions or should be fighting for championships not doing so. And Luke, that hurts the sport, and it creates sort of an us and them, where if you don't play ball with us, you know what I mean, we'll penalize you, but we also have you under contract, so you ain't going nowhere. I mean, that's not a healthy reality, Luke.
No, it's not. But if you've got it's not like you think like, oh, they can't keep doing this. And I'm like, dude, if the market is structured in such a way where you've got the kind of power that they've got, you absolutely can do it. Now, whether or not it's a good long-term thing because you sow so much negative energy with your talent that they end up wanting to sue you or get legislation passed or whatever. Yeah, that can be the argument. But I got to tell you, like, I've been around long enough. I have seen many, 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 many iterations of this kind of a battle, and each one's a little bit unique in their own way. And every time the UFC might do a little bit to like, give it back to the fighter. I remember there was an inexplicable pay bump for Cowboy Cerrone and TJ Dillashaw after that AAA thing. Right. Okay. We'll make it a little bit easier on you, but like real change. I got to tell you folks, real change comes from real work. And that ain't real work.
He's colorful.
You look good, you feel good, and you gonna fight good.
He's cocky.
He's got the style, the swag.
He's a can't-miss talent. Chris Primetime Colbert takes center stage against Olympic medalist King Tug Nyambayar. Plus, we live the epic pay-per-view clash between Tank Davis and Mario Barrios. 2 championship main events, one powerful night on Showtime.